Final Fantasy XIV is changing, and 7.3 is just the start. They have been listening to player feedback, and are finally able to act on it. Or that's at least how the latest interview with Yoshi P by Famitsu comes off to me. And I mean, this thing is absolutely packed with questions and answers about not only patch 7.3, not only about upcoming fanfests, but also the state of the game. So you know we have to read it and break it down. Hello everyone, I am Jmulls, and let's get right on into this, shall we? Okay, well, I don't speak Japanese, so we have Google Translate doing this. This is going to be a ride. As always, when it comes to interviews we cover that are natively in Japanese and we translate to English, we're going to take and look at the spirit of what is being said instead of specific nomenclature because, you know, we're not expecting perfection from Google Translate here, are we? But the translated article is entitled An Interview with Final Fantasy XIV Patch 7.3 Producer-Director Naoki Yoshida. Extreme, I'm pretty sure is a mistranslation of Ultimate, is scheduled for another release in 7.x. Echoes of Vana'diel will also update the lower levels of Judo. The next FanFest will be announced soon. Now, just as a heads up to get us in the right mindset, this interview was conducted in early July, but we've had the letter from the producer live since then, because the interview didn't come out until, you can see here, July 31st. So the interview starts out with a discussion about Fork Tower and the multiple difficulty levels, and Yoshi P once again apologizes for the overall quality and state that the content shipped with, and the various emergency maintenances the game needed as a result of that. This led to a discussion about the live letters, and the first one for Patch 7.3. In regards to that, the interview asks, again, bear in mind Google Translate here, during the broadcast, you responded to various pieces of feedback from players, but after seeing the reactions that followed, is there anything you feel you didn't say enough about? Please take this opportunity to tell us. And then Yoshi P replies, I used the word cost. Ah yes, who remembers that little tidbit that led to a lot of discussion during the broadcast, but I think I may have been a little unclear. Of course, even if I explained it in detail, it would still be dismissed as irrelevant to players, because, you know, when players are playing a game, they don't care about what went into the production of that game, generally speaking, they just care about the end product they're interfacing with. But, since it's a topic that inevitably comes up, I'd like to briefly explain it again. So we're going to dive into more detail about the whole cost situation. Currently, the Final Fantasy XIV team has several hundred staff members involved in development alone. Looking back, the number of staff members has been steadily increasing, but even so, developing large-scale content requires a period of several patches before it can reach a level that's acceptable to consumers. While you might think, then we should just increase the number of staff members, the actual development speed and quality depends not simply on the number of people, but on the number of leaders in each section. And this is going to be a point he really starts to talk about and elaborate on. This is true not only in game development, but in any other creative field. As technical professionals, we create a hierarchy of people who can create interesting things based on taste and skill level. Leaders emerge from within this hierarchy, but the number of such leaders becomes an issue. Furthermore, it's common for people who previously played a playing manager role, creating things themselves while managing subordinates, to suddenly stop producing interesting content when they focus solely on management. I feel as if Google Translate butchered that a little bit. I feel as if the heart of the matter there is you can have someone who is used to creating stuff in that artistic pursuit, right? And then you put them in a managerial position where they're trying to balance both creating something and managing other people, and they just end up focusing on managing people, and you lose their ability to create something themselves. The interviewer replies, that's the same can be said for our industry. Yoshi P goes back into this. So even though we're talking about personal costs or personnel costs, it's not a simple calculation of numbers. We're also planning to increase the number of staff on the QA team, but it's not just about increasing the number of testers. We'll also need a leader who can allocate personnel by taking into account how to test efficiently and where bugs are likely to appear. So you're not just throwing a bunch of QA testers and wasting their time on pieces of content that are likely not to be broken, and instead allocating those people to the parts of the game that most need QA testing because they have the highest likelihood likelihood of having bugs, or just being broken in one way or another, or just needing that QA testing. Naturally, we've been trying to increase the number of such people for the past decade or so, but it's not easy to do so. I think this is also related to the fact that there's an absolute shortage of online game developers in Japan. However, we'll be skipping around a bit, by the way, because it's a very long interview. I'll leave a link in the description down below if you want to read it for yourself, though. Go check it out. However, there aren't many core staff members in the world who can create an MMORPG of this scale, so whether we can easily increase our staff is another matter. That said, we've of course not given up on increasing our staff, and we're increasing and developing them over time, but the current situation is that it has become a competition with the scale up of Final Fantasy XIV itself. So the cost includes staffing costs like that, and Yoshi P replies to the interviewer, yes, with such limited personnel costs in a 4-month cycle, we have to aim to maintain a certain level of quality. What's more, we're also running development on large-scale content that takes about 2 patches, so we need to manage all of that while checking all the specifications and implementing them. Again, if players say, it's none of our business, that's true, but one of the policies I set for Final Fantasy XIV is to clearly explain why something can't be done, so it's a real challenge. Right, because you have a bunch of people out there that just don't care about what goes into the development of a piece of content or the state of the game. They just care about the end result because that's what they're paying for, that's what they're playing. And Yoshi P is like, yeah, so a lot of people out there aren't going to care, but we've set out to try to at least communicate why something happens or how something gets to the state that it's in. One of the things I've been seeing from people is this sentiment that Final Fantasy XIV is largely viewed to be the cash cow of Square Enix, so naturally Square Enix should allocate as many resources as is required to that game to make sure that it can be in the best position, in the best state that it possibly can be in. The interview then goes on about Fork Tower and the Occult Crescent, largely stuff we've talked about before or have seen Yoshi P talk about before as well. But like when it comes to the Fork Tower, Yoshi P says Fork Tower is actually created with the assumption that it could be cleared by 24 people if the strategy was established, and that the remaining 24 people could aim to clear it with support. However, there was a gimmick that required collective responsibility, so we felt that we had not made enough adjustments there. Therefore, the goal of 7.3 is to adjust it to the form that we were originally aiming for. The next Fork Tower is also currently in development, and we plan to implement it with the feedback from this time taken into consideration from the start. We have also received requests to create multiple difficulty levels, so the development team is working hard to achieve that goal no matter what. If you remember back at that one live letter where they talked about the amount of clears of Fork Tower, it was only like 400. That is a very low number at the time that number was announced for a piece of content like that, where it's supposed to be the big capstone event for the Occult Crescent, which is supposed to appeal to a lot of people. But now it's time to get into the MSQ. The summer vacation is over, and not in the Ed and Eddie way. Dontra was kind of advertised to be this summer vacation. It kind of made sense because we were just coming from the end of this 10-year-long saga where things got particularly dark and macabre. So having a brief respite that is lower stakes and more happy-go-lucky tone made sense. And while opinions of Dawntrail are mixed to say the least, patch 7.3 is signifying the end of the Dawntrail story before we move on to something else. And Yoshi P goes into what 7.3 and Dawntrail was for the Warrior of Light and what's going to happen next, at least hinting towards that, so let's read and find out more. Golden Legacy Dawntrail has been described as the Warrior of Light's summer vacation, but before the Warrior of Light begins his new life as a hero, he watches over the next generation, like Boruto, of young people as they search for their own path, sometimes offering help. This 7.3 patch focus on the theme of finding each character's path, starting with Ramichi Ukramant. I'm going to assume that means Wuklamat, and that just got butchered in Google Translate, and the others, which is why the patch title is Signposts for Tomorrow. The actual title in English is The Promise of Tomorrow. This signpost, I guess promise, though I think signpost is way more funny now, represents what Calyx is aiming for, and it also has a bearing on the Warrior of Light's own future. I think you'll gradually begin to see why the Warrior of Light must rise up as a hero once again. So we took on this mentor role, especially for Wuklamat, try to get them on their own paths. That's kind of largely remedied at this point. It's like Wuklamat is now the co-leader of Taral. I imagine in 7.3 we're going to sort out the issues in Alexandria, and with Calyx's machinations and maybe something else that happens, we're going to find out, hey, We have to answer the call again, the call of duty, not Modern Warfare. The interviewer asks, so the Warrior of Light's summer vacation is coming to an end. Yoshi P replies, saying the end of summer vacation suddenly makes me feel a bit melancholy. Wry smile. Anyway, I think we're starting to see the next hero's journey. Another important character is Sphene. Bless up. Sphene was put to sleep hundreds of years ago, regardless of his own will, and thought he was dead, Google Translate, but was suddenly resurrected. Meanwhile, the Sphene created from his memories has lived as Sphene for hundreds of years, harboring feelings and doing his best in his own way. Yeah, Google Translate's having a hell of a time here, but you know, it's the story of Sphene, where you had the Sphene we've been palling around with in 7.2, who woke up after so long and is kind of a fish out of water. Meanwhile, you also have the endless Sphene we interacted with in 7.0, but she also had the memories of the real Sphene. So you have this existential question going on. Is Sphene, the endless Sphene, alive? Was she ever real because she had the memories? Does that make us Sphene or not? These two Sphenes are similar in relationship to the original world and the mirror world. I'm gonna guess that means Shard. They originate from the same place, and in 7.3, I think we've managed to depict how the paths the two have walked intersect and what path Sphene will ultimately take. They both want what was best for Alexandria, but I'm imagining they're gonna go about doing that in different ways. You know, one being willing to dang the whole multiverse, and the other, the 7.2 Sphene, probably not gonna go down that route. Will there also be a resolution to the existence of the eternal people, the endless? An important theme in the story unfolding in 7.x. The issue of the Eternals endless, who appear in this story, will be resolved for the time being, depending on how the people of Solution 9 perceive them. However, I believe that the nature of humanity and can humans understand each other are eternal themes and essential elements in the next story arc of Final Fantasy XIV. I believe this is an area that will be gradually woven together, just as it was in the stories from A Realm Reborn to Endgame and Walker. In 7.x, we ask, if a person's memories are preserved, does that mean they are alive? But we plan to continue to depict the meaning of human life in different ways. I love when Final Fantasy XIV goes really existential, so I'm glad they're going in this direction. I think it's interesting stuff. There's a lot of different ways they can take this theme, so yeah, I'm on board with it. Is it the same theme glimpsed in different ways? That's right, this different way is something that will be relevant in the future, so I'll leave it at that for now. So, something in regards to the Endless will come back down the line. Maybe it's not the Endless specifically, or it will be the Endless, or like, it'll be the mechanism in how the Endless are created, something along those lines, and be dealing with, are they actually real or not? Can they be categorized as life or as living beings? There's a massive section here on the second Alliance raid, Sandoria, the Second Walk, but it gets really nerdy in terms of Final Fantasy XI lore that I am unaware of because I've never played Final Fantasy XI. Again, if you want to read this stuff, I'll leave a link to this interview in the description down below, but we are going to move on to the next section. Enter the Deep Dungeon. We've gone over the overview for this content before when it came to the live letter, so we're not going to rehash that, but this is the stuff I find absolutely fascinating. It's the philosophical shift in direction for Final Fantasy XIV going forward. So let's get deep into the weeds and get nerdy with it. The interviewer asks for an overview of the content. Yoshi P replies, before I explain this overview, I'd like to first talk about the direction of our content. Final Fantasy XIV is an MMORPG that has been supported by a huge number of players, many of whom have been playing continuously for a long time. Therefore, we have implemented various content aimed at different target demographics for each content. For example, an odd-numbered patch, we would implement Alliance raid dungeons aimed primarily at casual players, while on even-numbered patches, we would implement high difficulty raids for more intensive players, and even content of extreme difficulty. As a result, even when new content is implemented, not all players can enjoy it, even within the same patch. There is a trend where hardcore players only play this content, and casual players only play this content. This was my policy, and the results are consistent. The interviewer goes on, saying, it certainly depends on how you play, but there are quite a few players who only play content that interests them, which I think is a very natural thing to do, especially in a game that has a bunch of different things to do. You're gonna focus on what you actually enjoy, especially if you have limited time to actually play. Yoshi P replies, hardcore players want a high difficulty raid where they can race for world first. On the other hand, casual players want something they can clear in 2 or 3 tries and run around in. That's how we, the creators, have segmented the content and created it. Of course, I don't think it was a bad idea for Final Fantasy XIV up until now, where the main policy was to expand the total amount of content. By categorizing content in this way, the development team was able to establish guidelines for what to create and when, and because the rules were the same, we were able to focus in a certain direction, such as, for this content, we'll focus on boss battles. It makes sense if you don't have to consistently go back to the drawing board and you can just go, okay, we're going to be doing this, we know roughly what we have to do, let's get into the specifics now. Okay, this is for hardcore people, let's make some bosses. However, now we finally come to the conclusion that we should start making efforts to ensure that all players can enjoy the large-scale content we've worked so hard to create. I think it's a bit of a double-edged sword, because yeah, if you're spending a bunch of time creating one specific thing, having that only appeal to a small group of individuals feels really inefficient when you're trying to design a game to keep the attention of a whole bunch of people. But the problem is, when you try to design one thing to fit all sizes, you can run into the issue of it not specializing in anything, therefore not really pleasing any specific demographic. Now, I don't think that should be a reason to avoid this new direction plan, it's just something to be aware of. You have to nail the quality here. You want as many players as possible to enjoy the content you've implemented. Yoshi P goes, yes! This was somewhat the same as previous deep dungeons, where you could clear the story by reaching the 30th floor, and you could also strengthen your weapons and armor by repeatedly playing through up to the 30th floor. We had mid-range players take on the challenge of a fixed party of 4 to conquer the final floor, and the ultimate goal was to challenge themselves to conquer all floors from the first floor solo. Of course, there are still people who are looking forward to these deep dungeons, but on the other hand, also quite a few people who said, I won't play after the 31st floor. Therefore, you're designing a whole bunch of this content only to appeal to a small subset of people. Indeed, I think there was a fairly large proportion of players like that. Up until now, we thought that was fine, but starting with the deep dungeon, we have decided to make changes to all of the systems so that more people can play. Specifically, what kind of adjustments have been made? Yoshi P replies, previously, players could enter the dungeon up to floor 30 using matchmaking, and from then on, they had to form a party of 4. This time, however, we've redesigned the dungeon so that all floors can be cleared using matchmaking. We've also increased the number of floor divisions where players can restart, allowing players to enjoy the deeper floors more matchmaking based. Essentially, what they said in the live letter. There are more checkpoints at the higher levels, and you can do a match-made party for all of them. So if you wipe it like floor 79, you'll just be bumped back down to floor 71 instead of going all the way back to like floor 21. I think it makes a lot of sense and is smart because, especially in an environment where you're going to allow match-made parties all the way up to those higher floors, you don't want content that is overly punishing when it comes to your time investment in it, because people will just be less inclined to interface with it if they have that fear in the back of their mind that, oh, at any point here, someone else could screw things up and make me waste all of my time here. No one likes to lose when it comes to content like that, when you just grouped with a bunch of random people. Of course, we believe that a fixed party allows for more effective teamwork and is closer to clearing the dungeon, so we retained that element. However, we wanted to significantly change the previous system, which required no other means of clearing the dungeon. This shift allows players to challenge themselves and periodically aim for the next floor. Additionally, once players reach the boss on floor 99, even if they are wiped out, a new content will be unlocked that allows them to challenge just that boss battle. This content is separate from the deep dungeon, and once players can consistently defeat the boss, we encourage players to aim for the final floor, whether in a fixed party or 4-person party. This isn't just a reduction in difficulty, it's about making the challenge easier, allowing even casual players to experience the entire deep dungeon. I think Google Translate butchered this a little bit. To me, the spirit of what is trying to be conveyed here is that it's not trying to necessarily make the content itself easier, but to make the challenge more approachable, and moving the difficulty away from necessarily how punishing the content can be in terms of how much progress you can lose, and move it towards, okay, I want to play the game, I want to do these floors, I can still lose a bit of progress, but it's not going to be like ball crushing like it could have been before. It feels like there are more opportunities to play. If the range of matching increases, it'll be easier to play deeper. Basically, the question's going, hey, if you make it easier for people to get into parties, it'll be easier for people to get to those higher floors, especially if you have more checkpoints. Yoshi P replies, I think one of the strengths of Final Fantasy XIV is that it allows players to play at a relaxed pace thanks to its matchmaking system, or just its overall matching system, so we decided to expand that range this time. However, just like the previous deep dungeons, there are quite a lot of enemies near the final floor, many of which have troublesome attacks. Also, if you rush in without a plan, there is a risk of stepping on a trap and being wiped out. So it is designed to be challenging to play. It's just, if that does happen and you stand on a trap and you blow up, you're not going to be knocked all the way back down to like floor 21, just your last checkpoint. I think if you're trying to make this content appeal more to a casual player base, reducing the perception of overall punishing mechanics that make people believe, hey, if something goes wrong here, I can just waste a bunch of my time. That is a very easy way to get people to check out of a system, but giving them more safety nets for when they fall, that can encourage a lot of people to go out and try it. And this is what I've been talking about when it comes to stuff like Quantum, right? To sum up, the current theme for Final Fantasy XIV is, if we are going to implement it, we aim to create content that all players can enjoy. This is not just for deep dungeons, but we hope to expand this image to other content in the future. I will be very interested to see what they do for variant dungeons in 7.4. The next part goes into detail about Quantum overall and the specifics, but that was also covered in the live letter. And for Quantum, it's that boss fight at the very end that is scalable in difficulty, where when you beat the deep dungeon, clear all the floors, you'll get a bunch of offerings. There's a few different types, and depending upon the combination of offerings you put in, it'll augment the boss and make them stronger accordingly, by buffing various stats depending upon the offerings you put in. And right here, however, offering the maximum number of all types makes it extremely difficult. In terms of difficulty, it's more difficult than Savage 4, the fourth boss in a Savage tier. So hardcore players looking to play high difficulty content should definitely aim to clear this ultra difficult battle. For the rewards, I imagine it's going to be largely the same as other deep dungeons, but when it comes to the Quantum fight, the more offerings you put in, the more rewards you get, as a general rule of thumb. While the rewards themselves are the same, the number you receive changes depending on the numbers of offerings you make. Therefore, there's no title that you can only get if you increase the difficulty level, except for the title for defeating the most difficult battles. The idea is that those who can clear high difficulty battles can efficiently earn reward numbers. Again, Google Translate strikes again. The harder the content, the more rewards you'll get. The interviewer goes, this is a gameplay mechanism that's never been seen before within Final Fantasy XIV. I don't think there's anything similar to this in FF14, says Yoshi P. So far, we often receive feedback that it would be more fun if there were multiple difficulty levels for a single boss, and this is our response to that. We've designed it so that it's easier to aim for completion through matchmaking, and once you've achieved it once, boss battle itself will be counted as content, allowing you to practice and aim for completion. Even in content that only features a boss battle, we've made it so that some of the items the boss drops can be obtained with a low probability. Whether you're looking for a challenging battle or just looking to earn rewards, players will have their own motivations. In addition, we've introduced a new system to the strategy guide that allows you to steadily earn rewards each week, and you can even earn physical items from there. We're currently adjusting Pilgrim Traverse to cater to all types of players, so we hope you'll give it a try. They mentioned this in the live letter, where if you just do the regular boss fight, the items the boss can drop, yeah, you can still get them from like the regular mode, unless I read that part of the live letter wrong. It's just it'll have a low chance to drop. But if you do the more challenging version, again, we'll have to wait and see for launch in terms of how all this stuff is balanced, because there's a lot of potential pitfalls when it comes to this overall implementation, though I do like the idea, and I am glad they're at least willing to try something like this. Speaking of, so it's a trial version of content that will interest all players. This is one of the things I talked about when they announced this system. This feels like them beta testing where they want to take the game overall going into the future. Yoshi P says, that's right. If we don't continue to create with this level of enthusiasm in the future, the impression won't change, and we'll always hear from all sides that there isn't enough content for players like us, so we're going to change our fundamental way of thinking and make an effort to make what we create available to everyone. Now it's time to talk about everyone's favorite piece of content to talk about but never play, Ultimate. Now, they use the word extreme for this. I'm pretty sure in English it's supposed to be ultimate, so that's what I will say. Another ultimate content in the 7.x series. There will be no ultimate content in 7.3, but are there any plans for ultimate content in the 7.x series? Yoshi P replies, this time the hidden boss in Pilgrim Traverse is one that requires 40 offerings, which is pretty close to the ultimate version, but it still requires 4 people to defeat it. Of course, we plan to implement it once more in the 7.x series, series, and we are currently in the process of creating it. As I've said many times before, developing an Ultimate version is really difficult. Basically, we're going to get in the Ultimate before 8.0, it's just not in 0.3. But if you do 40 offerings in the Quantum fight, even though it's a 4-man dungeon group, you know, it'll be analogous to an Ultimate fight. Or the way they put in the live letter, it'll have mechanics that are Ultimate level. Then a quick little blurb, oh, I'm looking forward to it, by the way, do you have any future plans for the Ultimate version? Yoshi P replies, first of all, we're developing Zetsu, I'm not sure what that is, and future plans for Zetsu have not yet been decided. Zetsu can only be made by staff who are at a level where they can handle Zetsu. So, as I have said many times before, if you think I'm the one, please apply to be a development staff member. Laughs. This sounds to me like, look, the people that are going to design an Ultimate fight are also the ones that have to be able to handle it. If you think you can do it, apply for a job. Now look, I understand crafting and gathering isn't for everyone, but again, I care about the heart of the matter, the meat and the potatoes, the philosophy behind a lot of his content, and Yoshi P gets into some interesting stuff when it comes to talking about the next cosmic exploration zone in 7.3x, Sphene, the glass planet, as they call it here. So let's get into this. Let's get into it. Talking about cosmic exploration in the new zone, Yoshi P says, it's been powered up in many ways with a different version of mecha operation and continuous collaborative construction work. However, the most important thing is the feel. Personally, one of the things I learned from the previous cosmic exploration was that I was very concerned about the versatility of each task. First of all, crafting and gathering could be made more elaborate, but when you think about repeating tasks over and over again, if each playthrough is heavy, it becomes difficult to play. For that reason, in the Reborn 2.0 game, we deliberately made it possible to complete tasks with macros, and focused on the satisfaction of getting the economy going with what you gather and create with your own hands. Conversely, that's why the tasks themselves are designed to be so simple. Yeah, if they're having you do hundreds if not thousands of crafts over and over and over again, if they make each of those ball-shatteringly hard, you'll just burn out really quickly. Interviewer goes, it's true that if crafting and gathering were to be repeated hundreds of thousands of times and made too complicated, it might be mentally taxing. Yoshi P. However, my impression after playing Cosmic Exploration, despite being the latest content, is that it hasn't evolved beyond its simple design, and that the thinking has stalled. Of course, creating quantity to give it volume is extremely important. However, on the other hand, neglecting the feel of the game makes it difficult to provide a good gameplay experience. If you focus too much on quality, it's unlikely to be something that many people will enjoy, and if there's only quantity, it tends to just become a chore. I think the balance in this area is very poor in the current version of Cosmic Exploration. To improve this, we are currently having 70 to 80 staff members actually play the missions and collaborative construction work, discussing and adjusting things like is this enough to provide enjoyment, and why is the sound effect in this scene generic rather than unique? Yeah, it's one of my biggest issues when it comes to Cosmic Exploration. A lot of the missions you actually do don't require a lot of thought, and they end up feeling like you're doing this same exact thing over and over and over and over and over again. And like what I've been saying for a lot of the grinds in Final Fantasy XIV, if they ask you to do the same thing over and over and over again, it doesn't matter if it's like easy to do or if it's really hard to do. If what you're doing feels hyper repetitive and boring and dull and stale, at least personally, I'm just going to lose interest. And I imagine I'm not alone in that. So I'm glad they're addressing this and saying, look, it's a problem, we need to address it, we're trying to. And I'm glad the focus is not necessarily on how much content can we put in here, it's how much fun can we put in here. Should have been like that from the start, but better late than never. My opinion, you can't critique something and say, you should do this, and then get upset at the fact that they're doing that. Saying, oh, you should have done it before. Yeah, that's why we gave the critique. We want them to implement these types of changes. It seems like it's quite difficult to find the right balance. Everyone has different tastes. It's a lot of work, but the lines that Reparate says in missions, one of the Loporith I'm imagining, and other situations are written by the development staff, so you could say they've filled with our feelings. Since we're communicating our feelings through the Loporiths and having players play the game, I think it's important to provide a sense of accomplishment and satisfaction that matches that. They're probably referring to the Loporith that yaps at you when you're doing the missions. It's not just cosmic exploration, but recently I've been concerned that in order to increase quantity, there are cases where the sensations and sense of accomplishment felt while playing are being neglected. That's exactly what I've been saying, especially in things like the Occult Crescent when it came to the Relic Weapon, or when it came to things like fate grinding and stuff like that. You're asking the player to do a lot, and you get a lot of time investment and engagement from the player, here, but the stuff they're doing, the stuff I'm doing is not particularly thrilling or engaging or fun. Fun and engaging content doesn't have to be hard, it doesn't have to be easy, but it has to be engaging. And just asking the player to do a bunch of an activity doesn't necessarily make that activity good or fun or compelling. And even if the grind doesn't necessarily take all that long, including in regards to like older games or other games out there, that doesn't make it good by default. It's been the biggest philosophical thorn that I've had with this game that's just been always in my side. The grinds themselves are just kind of bland to me. I don't mind doing something once or twice in this game, but when the game asks me to do it over and over and over and over again, after like a week or two, I just bow out, I'm gone. I can't be asked. And you can say, oh, then just take a break. Yeah, but Final Fantasy XIV is the type of game that I and many others want to get that feeling from. I want to get the feeling where I'm like, oh, I want to play some Final Fantasy XIV today. I want to do this, this, and this. And you can have a bunch of content to do, but if that content isn't fun and interesting, then how much actionable content do you actually have? Rather than just a giant to-do list of chores. While the overall structure is of course important, I want everyone on the development team, including myself, to be aware of this and focus on creating content that feels good to the touch. To that end, I'm also working to improve the accuracy of my PD checks. There's the original text right there. I imagine that's Yoshi P essentially saying, look, I'm going to be going over things with a finer tooth comb from now on. Old check. Recently my eyes have been really tired, dry, and blurry. Yo, same. But for me, this is one of the things I wanted them to talk about for the longest time. This has been a recurring issue that I've had with a bunch of content in Final Fantasy XIV for a while now. You can give me a grind, you can give me a list of things to do, but if that content isn't fun, if me pressing my buttons isn't engaging, I'm not going to want to do it. Just because I can get a lot of time investment from a grind in the game doesn't make that grind enjoyable. It doesn't make it fun or engaging. It's a video game at the end of the day. It should be engaging. You can get to engaging content in a variety of ways, but asking me to do the same hyper-repetitive task over and over and over and over again, even if it's not as bad as games that have come before, that doesn't make it good in the modern day, in my opinion. It's the reason I never stuck around with like deep dungeons before in this game, because after a few floors, after a few attempts at it, I'm just like, this feels dull and repetitive to me, I'm out. I'd rather go do something else. There's not enough variation, there wasn't enough fun or engaging content for me. What people find fun and engaging will vary based on the individual, because it's personal preference, right? But I'm just saying, for me, over the last couple of years, this game has really struggled in terms of maintaining my attention outside of like a week or two with each new patch. So them actually talking about, Yoshi P specifically talking about, look, it's not just a matter of we need to have a bunch of quantity in this game, we need to make it so when you're pressing your buttons, it's fun. We need to make it so the content that you're doing is engaging. That to me is the canary in the coal mine. That to me is the philosophical shift in perspective I've wanted to see from this game for a while now. Now it's a matter of, can you follow through? You're walking the walk, but you need to cross that finish line. You're showing me cool things that I like to see in terms of design when it comes to the next deep dungeon. I'm still not sure how much I'm going to enjoy that piece of content by itself, but you're moving in a direction that I think is better. I'm looking forward to see how they build on this idea. And for when we'll probably get more details on how they're going to continue going in that direction, let's talk FanFest. It's almost that time again, people. FanFest season is fast approaching, which means updates, announcements for 8.0, the next expansion. We've skipped ahead in the interview. Again, if you want to read the other parts, link in the description down below. And let's get right into it. I'm looking forward to the latest patch, 7.3. At the same time, we're starting to see glimpses of 8.0, and I imagine plans for the fan festival are already underway. Finally, please tell us again about the highlights of 7.3 and your outlook for the future of Final Fantasy XIV. This will be the big question mark going forward for Final Fantasy XIV. How do you address this overall vibe shift in the community? Because it didn't come from nowhere. It's not like all this negativity just came out of the freaking sky one day. It has been building for a while, and the House of Cards fell. A lot of people are upset and dissatisfied at the current state of Final Fantasy XIV. It is on them now to address that, take that player feedback into account, and do what they will with it. I am liking what I'm hearing from them. I am liking what I'm seeing from not only the MSQ of 7.2, but the new deep dungeon at 7.3. We're going to need more than that. As I said in the 86 7th PLL, I don't think that Final Fantasy XIV is perfect in its current state, and I'm keenly aware that we're facing major challenges precisely because we've built it up over so many years. After receiving a variety of feedback, I've finally been able to put it into words, and patch 7.3 is the time we're beginning to make concrete changes. So this is supposedly when it begins, when all the feedback has been heard, digested, and we start to see it implemented into the game. Changes according to that feedback. Having been making MMORPGs for so many years, I know this. The image and impression of the content never change with a single system, piece of content, or patch. 1000%! You cannot change people's perspective on anything with just one thing, whether that be a new system, a new dungeon, a new zone, or a new patch, or sometimes even an expansion. You have to show consistent effort in improving the game and making actual changes to the game that people like and want to see. You can lose trust quickly, but it's hard to gain trust back. Just as it was with the original Final Fantasy XIV, I believe we can only gain trust and confidence by continuing to build on it one step at a time. I agree. So we want to approach this as a new starting point for us as well. So from here on, you aim to further evolve FF14. Sick screenshot, bro, by the way. Of course, I don't expect all content to suddenly reach the level I've talked about today, but I want to do my best to show a glimpse of that and my determination. So I'd be happy if you could try out each piece of content, even if just a little. In particular, for battles, Pilgrim Traverse will be the first test. I'd be happy if you could play it from various angles and give us your feedback. That's what I was talking about when they announced the new Deep Dungeon and the changes they made to it. It feels like them testing overall ideas they may want to take in the future. And this is just him coming out and saying, yeah, that's essentially what we're doing. Your opinions may have an impact on the future of Final Fantasy XIV. Yoshi P replies, we would definitely like to use the feedback we received in the next update. Incidentally, we are planning a new variant dungeon in the upcoming patch 7.5. 7.4, that was a bad bit on my part. Look, I tried to put up 3 because I thought it'd be funny with patch 7.4, but then my brain short-circuited and I said 5. We can just ignore it. Which will also be a bit different from previous versions. We've changed the flavor so that it can be enjoyed by a wider range of players, and we've also prepared new mechanisms. Essentially saying, look, we made a lot of changes to the Deep Dungeon in 7.3. We're doing something like that with the variant dungeon. It's not just going to be a regular old variant dungeon. We are making changes to the structure overall. In this way, we aim to create each major piece of content so that it can be enjoyed by a wide range of players, so please look forward to it. We can't reveal the details yet, but of course, there'll be a lot in 8.0 as well. This is what I was talking about with the Deep Dungeon. It's like, I didn't think we would see a lot of these types of changes until 8.0, but what they're doing is showcasing it bit by bit, hopefully culminating in a big direction shift with 8.0. Now for the real part of this section of the video, are you planning to announce the Fan Festival soon? It's customary to announce new expansion packs at the Fan Festival. He knows exactly what we're looking for. It seems like the date and venue have been finalized, so we're hoping to make the announcement soon. Also, currently, updates in China and Korea are lagging behind Japan, North America, Europe, etc., but we plan to catch up during the 7.x series and unify the update timing for both. In other words, the entire global update will be synchronized. If that happens, the Fan Festival must be quite a challenge. Rai smile. Usually it's held in 3 locations, North America, Europe, and Japan, but does that mean it might be held in 5 locations next time? TLDR for this next section, by the way? No. Basically, he's saying it's impossible for the next expansion. We have a separate team in charge of doing these events, and what we want to do is focus on development while also properly communicating with everyone. And that is the end of the interview. Again, largely in line with a lot of the thinking I had since that last live letter, where it's like, okay, we've been having a bunch of player feedback be told to us in various ways. We know people are upset and not happy with the state of the game. Some people are, absolutely, but a lot of people aren't. This is them saying, look, we hear you, we feel you, but we need time to actually incorporate these changes. We need time to think about how we're going to change the direction of this game. We need to find ways to implement those types of changes into the game. That stuff doesn't happen overnight. We know for Final Fantasy XIV, they plan out a bunch of this content way in advance, and with the way this game is developed, you can't just flip a switch and completely change everything overnight. But 7.3 seems to be a massive patch for Final Fantasy XIV overall.
Go unanswered.
There will always be unhappy people online. You are never going to please everyone. Personally speaking, I haven't been satisfied with the state of Final Fantasy XIV for a while now. And Yoshi P pretty much talked about all the reasons I have been dissatisfied in that interview. And he addressed them in saying, look, we are trying to improve on these elements. Fair play. And it's like, if you actually can change the game in accordance to that feedback and move the game in a better direction, I'm all on board with that. I'm not going to be someone that will just find any reason to be upset about something. If I don't like something, I will say that. But if I like something, I'm going to say that too. I wasn't happy with the story in 7.0. I thought 7.1 moved in a better direction, but that entire train bit put me to sleep. 7.2, I was fully engaged with. I really liked that. If we get more stuff like that, I'm all on board with it. But I didn't like the Occult Crescent that much. I talked about why I didn't like it. If they can move the game in a new direction, and I understand that can take time, and I'm more than willing, personally speaking, to at least hear them out, because I want it done right. I don't want just some list of changes made to the game to be slapped on a bunch of things done overnight in a lazy way that don't address the root systemic issue that I had with the game. Then I still have to some degree. I want the game to go in a better direction. That takes time. What they're talking about here, like I said before, you can talk the talk, you can even walk the walk. You have to get to that end goal. You have to get to that destination. I like what I'm hearing. I'm liking what I'm seeing when it comes to 7.3. I am way more interested and invested in 7.3 overall than I thought I was going to be. The next test will be the variant dungeon in 7.4. Alongside, can they maintain the level of quality in the storytelling from 7.2 when it comes to 7.3 and the remaining patches? And then when we get to FanFest, they have to come out swinging. You don't have to drop everything at the first FanFest, right? But it's just, when we get to 8.0, we need to see that good philosophical shift taken into account, and we need to see those changes in the game. Because like Yoshi P said, if you want to change online sentiment, you can turn it against you really quickly. He didn't say this specifically, but he kind of alluded to it. You can get people to go against you really quickly, but to regain favorability, to regain trust, that takes time and consistent effort. You can't just give up because one thing doesn't necessarily land. The Deep Dungeon is not going to win back everyone who dropped out of the game, but it can be a brick that is used as part of something greater. So here's where you come in. Leave a comment down below with what you would like to see Final Fantasy XIV improve on the most. Is it job design? Is it housing? Is it character customization? Is it something with the story? Is it something small? Is it something big? I would love to hear your thoughts and hear your opinions and hear your perspectives. And if you want to be up to date with all things Final Fantasy XIV and you want to see my coverage of patch 7.3, you should leave a like and subscribe. Follow me on TikTok, Twitch, and Twitter, Jmulls G. I have a Discord in the description down below if you want to come by and talk about gaming in Final Fantasy XIV. And look, it's no secret that people have a lot of opinions about Final Fantasy XIV right now. And what we like to do around these parts is react to them. Feed me more! And if you want to see some hot takes my community has, and all you guys have for Final Fantasy XIV, you should check out this video right here. Stay safe, have a great day, go play some video games, and I'll see you all again next time. Bye bye everybody, until we meet again!